it's a great, for me, it's a great honor and pleasure to have Pastor Dave and Mandy Campbell. Mandy has worked for Elim Missions for as long as I can remember, okay? And as long as I have known Elim Missions, Mandy's been there. And Mandy's responsible for sending teams out and organizing all that. And I always used to say, Mandy makes us missionaries look good. You know, it's true. And so it's a great pleasure. I've asked, I've prepared. Let me just, can you hold this mic?
I can hold that. Isn't he a good pastor? Isn't he good? He's very good.
I'll clap myself. Thank you very much.
I dropped a hint, but nobody took it. And if it doesn't work out as a pastor, you get a good job as a furniture remover.
So I'm going to invite this wonderful couple to come up and grab a seat. Both of you.
I'm coming. It takes a while.
Don't. It was all that food. We just get your wee foot still now.
I'm at the age when standing up takes a bit of planning. We can't just jump up. But
So I've asked Mandy just to share her heart, share some of her testimonies, just came back recently from Cambodia. And here's the microphone. Go.
Well, I've been thinking all day about what to actually say to you, because when it comes to missions, my heart is always full. It's always overflowing. And it's like I want everyone in the world to get it. And but I wanted to just rewind slightly back to our journey together in ministry, because we met, almost 40 years ago now, in my home church, which is Ashbourne Elim Pentecostal Church, where your friend Adam has recently gone as the minister. So he's the pastor of what was my home church. So that was where I grew up and where I became a Christian. And then in 1979, I think it was, 78, David became the minister of my church. And when I heard a Scotsman was coming, I was, very, very sad. Because I'd always had this belief, the Scots don't like the English. But anyway, love changed all of that. And David began by asking me to be his typist, I suppose you'd call it, really, because, the computer hadn't quite arrived, and I was madly typing notes on the tabernacle, which David said he really needed doing.
Really did.
I later realised that this was just one of David's ploys to get the girl, and so...
An old romantic I am. Nothing like the tabernacle to woo a woman.
So, David, this is my turn to have the microphone. I really appreciate it.
This is why I have to put up with all
I would really appreciate it, Marty, if you could ask David to quieten down. And so the end of typing the tabernacle notes culminated in Dave saying he'd like to take me out for lunch to thank me for all my hard work, which was almost became a marriage proposal, I think, didn't it, David? So, and the rest is history. But the reason I'm saying all of that was because we began our life in ministry as a pastor and a pastor's wife, and I would like to believe that I was a good, dutiful pastor's wife. I was the buy one, get one free, and I think I did everything that I could to make that journey as good as it could be for David and I as a husband and wife and in ministry. But if I'm really, really, really honest, I think I struggled a lot with insecurity, with fear, with a belief that I would never, ever be any good, that I would never amount to anything, that I was married to the big man that everybody loved and adored, who could preach the word, who could stand on platforms, who could pray for the sick, who could prophesy over everything that moved. And I did fight a lot of inadequacy, and I did fight a lot of fear. And it was only when, I'm not saying it was an unhappy time, it was a real privilege to serve God in St Albans in the church that we pastored, and our children grew up there, and, you know, they walked with God, and they were great days, really great days. But I guess that when that time drew to an end and David and I were praying about our future and David's new role, which was to become a regional leader within Elim, I did think, well, you know, what am I going to do? And I would have been quite happy, I think, just being a mum and a grandma eventually and just attending local church. But then the most incredible thing happened, and I was asked to assist in what was then a fundraising arm of Elim International Missions, and I did that for a couple of years and eventually started to head up what was known as LifeLink, which was really about women fundraising for missions. And from that came a permanent job with Elim Missions, and I was asked to consider a role working out of the Elim International office. And it has been the absolute joy and privilege of my life, and it's changed my life. And I know that sounds really cliche, but it's in that time that I think God really showed me his amazing plan and purpose for my life, because I realized that mission brought out the very best in me as a Christian. It's the best way that I can express my Christianity. And I started to devour scripture about the poor and about God's heart for justice. And I remember I Googled every scripture that God had spoken about the poor and about justice for the poor. And it has become the all-consuming passion of my life, you know, this thing about justice, this thing about God's heart for the poor. And I'm no Mother Teresa. I really am not. You know, I'm quite worldly. I like going shopping. I like nice clothes. I like getting my hair done in expensive hair salons. While I've got the mic, I'm really going to make the most of this. You know, I love all of those things. I'm as much a person of the world as anyone else, but inside of me, I know God has placed this massive heart for the poor. And in the Bible where it says the love of Christ compels us, that's when it makes sense to me when I think about what God wants us to do for the poor. And I don't think being a mission person is something that you become. I think it's something you inhabit. It is us. It's who we are as Christians. And you know, I just love the job I do, and I can't think of anywhere else I'd rather be in terms of employment. I don't get up in the morning and think, oh, I've got to go to work. I think, oh my goodness, this is my job. I get paid to do this, and I just can't believe what God has done and how much he's given me. Just the best job I could ever have wished for. I still love doing all the stuff I do with Dave, and it's not often I even get to travel with Dave, to be honest, because we are that couple where we go in one direction and he goes in the other. He comes home from work and I leave to go to work, and that is a lot of our marriage, and probably why it works. I don't know. And we don't get to do this together very often, but I just love my job. And I thought, what actually can I share with you about my job? And it would be almost impossible to define everything that I do. But I'd like to just tell you a little bit about some of the people that I've met. I travel a lot with Linda, actually. Linda and I are the Ant and Dec of Elim Missions. We travel together. We, we spend lots of time together. We are absolutely the best of friends. She lives in Cardiff. I live in London. Logistically, it's not always easy to see lots of each other, but we can be on the phone. I can drive from Malvern back to London and still be on the phone to Linda. And so we've done a lot of travel together, so it's lovely having my buddy here tonight. But we recently were in Cambodia, and sometimes God puts a certain thing that's really on your heart, and for me it is the exploitation of women and how just incredibly bad that is around the world, and just the deal that women have in so many countries of the world. I think I'm so blessed to be a woman in the UK with the right to speak with a microphone, with the right to vote, with the right to have a job. And, you know, when I'm in Cambodia, I realise just how different life can be for a woman. And I just wanted to tell you stories of 3 girls that have just radically impacted my life. The first one is a girl called Sakim, and I met her probably about 4 or 5 years ago. She had joined our Be Free program. Now, this is a program which rehabilitates girls who've been in the sex trafficking industry. There's about 43 million slaves worldwide. Modern day slavery, it's now called. And the exploitation of women is a huge part of that, and women end up trapped in slavery in Cambodia, in sexual slavery, because sex is an industry in Cambodia. A woman is a commodity in Cambodia. A child is a commodity in Cambodia. And the sad truth is that children do not have the same value on their lives that we in the UK would put on our children. I literally would lay down my life for my grandchildren and my children. I really would. And when I go to Cambodia and I see how different that is, not amongst the Christian people, but amongst the general population, and I see how little value is on the life of a child, it hurts so badly, I can hardly bear it. And you will find that parents will willingly send their children to school in the day and send them out to men at night for sex, because that brings in money. So Sir Kim was one of those children. She was sold at the age of 4 by her parents. They took money for her at 4 years old. I have 3 grandchildren that age, and I cannot honestly believe that that could even happen. So at 4 years old, she was sold, and she went into domestic servitude. Children of 4 have to wait on richer people and cook meals, sweep floors, clean, look after other children. 4 years old. She would have been beaten when she didn't do her job properly. She eventually got involved in a relationship and had a child. And of course, the man didn't want to know. So she raised a child on her own. Eventually, her life took lots of twists and turns, but she came to Hagar, which is a charity in Cambodia which rescues girls from the sex industry. And she was rescued and eventually came to Be Free, which is our project in Cambodia. If I could ask you to consider doing something tonight, it would be to think about how you could help us in these amazing projects which go on around the world to help these girls. Because when she came to Be Free, her life started to change radically. She made crafts. She was good at card making. But, you know, she was a downcast woman. She'd had a terribly tough life. She's now the manager of Be Free Cambodia, which is our centre which rehabilitates girls coming out of the sex industry. She helps them to make crafts. She helps them to acquire skills which they can eventually go on and get out of the sex industry. She's now married, and she's had another beautiful little child, a little boy called Daniel. She's in the worship team in Cambodia, and it's what I call God's redemptive power. And I don't think I've ever seen it more strongly than I've seen it in Cambodia. I've seen what God's redemption does in the life of a human being. And Sir Kim, I'm getting so emotional. Sir Kim is a radically different person, and she has the most beautiful family. She has a smile which will go from ear to ear, and I absolutely adore her. She's one girl that I've seen God change beyond recognition. Then I met Ali. In my last visit, I met Ali. And Ali told us her story. We sat down having a nice drink in a lovely bar in Phnom Penh, in the capital. And I said, Ali, would you tell us your story? And I knew it would be painful for her. So the story goes, she was born, no idea who to, but from the minute she was born, she was abandoned. She was put literally onto a rubbish dump. It's not unusual in Cambodia for babies to be discarded. And she was put on a rubbish dump. Someone heard her cry and picked her up. And she led a very difficult life, even though the couple who found her wanted to take her in and look after her. They were not allowed to. There's so many traditions and witchcrafty ideas that, you know, if you have a child like that, it will bring you bad luck. And so they weren't allowed to keep her. So she went into domestic servitude. She led a life of absolute slavery. She eventually went to Hagar, another time that a person has gone there to be helped. Thank God for Hagar in Cambodia, doing a very good work. But while she was there, she went out one evening, and these were her words. On the way back, 2 boys attacked her. She said to me, I did not know how you got a baby. I did not know how a baby got there. And these 2 boys attacked her. And of course, 9 months later, she was in incredible pain, didn't even know what was happening to her. She gave birth to a little girl. I've met Solika. You would never know that that was the way she came into this world. Beautiful, bright Cambodian child, doing really well at school. And she was a single mother, and she persevered and persevered. She came eventually to Be Free and went through our rehabilitation program. She's now the manager of the Elim guest house in Cambodia. She's so proud. She can't help showing you around all these beautiful rooms that she has made look beautiful, with beautiful blankets, with flowers in the rooms. And this is her baby. This is her project. And she looks after all of our overseas teams and all the guests that come to Elim, Cambodia. And she's just the most wonderful, wonderful girl. And I love her so very much. And then on the very last day I was in Cambodia, I was asked to share a little Bible study with some of the girls who are currently in our program. These are some of the most abused and frightened girls you will ever meet. They don't have the smile yet. They're just coming in. They're just learning about Jesus. They're finding faith in Christ. And I met a girl called Ganya, her name is. Tiny, tiny girl. They look about 14, 15, these girls. And we'd taken them to a cafe to have cake and coffee, and you'd have thought they'd won the lottery. They've never been out for cake. They've never been to a beautiful shop that sells cake and coffee. And as her cake appeared, I realised there was a candle in the cake because one of the girls had mentioned it was her birthday. She absolutely broke down as we sang Happy Birthday, and she said in her broken English, "I never have birthday." It was the first time she'd ever celebrated a birthday. She doesn't know how old she is. And it really struck me going home in the tuk-tuk that most of the girls have no idea when their birthday is because they've been abandoned, they've been sold by their parents, they've been put into slavery, and they've no idea who they really are and where they come from, where they were born. I asked Sir Kim, "Have you ever met your real mother?" She goes, "No, I never find her." And this is the life of a Cambodian girl. And this is why I do what I do. This is why it matters. It really matters to me. And I want to see an end to this injustice. I want to see an end to this plight of women. I cried all the way home from the airport. And I go back to my comfortable life, my really comfortable life. And I can't bear how British people moan. They really moan about nothing. We have nothing to moan about. Please, if I can say anything, remember how blessed we are. We are privileged to have a British passport. We're privileged because we were born in the United Kingdom. And I would love for every one of you to just come on this journey with me. I hope I've been able to just impart a little of what my heart just tells me to do. And I think probably my defining scripture is Isaiah 58, where it says, "If you spend yourselves on behalf of the hungry," because God's currency has got nothing to do with money. It's about loving his people. It's about laying your life down. It's about just taking someone under your wing. And one of the girls in Cambodia said to me, what is your greatest dream? And I replied, I didn't even have to think about it. I said, my greatest dream in my life is to make a difference. I just long to leave a legacy. I want to leave something behind that I did for the Lord that was worth doing. And that's why I thank God so many times every day of my life for what I have, for the husband I have, for the home I live in, for the children that I've been able to grow and nurture into incredible young women, for the grandchildren he's blessed me with. I take none of it for granted because I know how hard life is for those less fortunate.
Well done.
Dave, you've been on this journey with Mandy. How has that affected you? How has that affected your ministry? Tell us a bit about that.
I think I've always had a heart for justice, and these things upset me too. I'm not a happy person, but there's such depth of need in the world too, and I think that we can't change everything, but we can change everything for somebody. And so it's almost like you don't just give up. You say, well, what can we do? And if everybody did what they could do, a huge amount would happen. And I'm aware that so all of our ministry, really, the church, we've also had that desire to, get a vision for your own family, get a vision for your church, get a vision for your city, pray for a nation, but really also have something for outside of yourself. And I think healthy people have a vision outside of themselves. They do things that we don't get anything back from. And I suppose that's what we always did in our church. We've always like double tithe. We gave money to Elim. I've given them now 10% to missions. And I was just saying, in '94, we had a revival in our church, and the Holy Spirit really moved in power. But in that next 12 months, I guess you say God was moving in your meetings, but also over 120 people in the church went on short-term missions around the world. And we only had a couple of hundred people in the church, so nearly everybody went. Hardly anybody didn't go. And I think when the Holy Spirit touches your heart, if it doesn't make you want to go to the nations, you weren't in the right place, you know. Yeah, and sometimes for us, the nations is around the corner. But we live in a global village now where you can go on a short-term mission, you can do sorts of things, you can give and make a difference, and it's huge, the difference. And I guess that, I don't know, a couple of times, I've had a couple of scrapes where I thought I might have died, and one of the things that's made me feel that I get emotional. I never used to get emotional. I'm crying when Mandy's talking tonight, it's daft. I'm from Clydeside, you don't die, your dog dies, you don't cry. But it's just, that's the way I am. But I have just found that God has softened my heart. And I cannot watch injustice on TV. If it's a film of it, I have to turn it off. And I was watching something on Panorama when Mandy came in this week. The care home thing. I had to turn it off. I thought, it just upset me too much. I can't, not because I didn't want to know. I do want to do something about it. But I find injustice really upsets me because, and I think that's the heart of God, really. He is so, he fights for the widows and the poor, and he's on their side. And we're actually on God's side. So if he's on their side, that means we must be on their side too. So we have to fight for the widows, the fatherless, the poor. And I find that God's motivated my heart in that. I don't need prompting to do that. I need holding back sometimes. I really want to do it and see it.
I just want to open to you guys to ask questions to either Pastor David or Mandy. So ask away, and I'll run with the mic. Come on, must have some. Any questions about anything? It is. It's a good opportunity. Don't let this opportunity pass. Right, you think. Daniel's got one. You want me to run the whole way up there? Okay. Just to get me moving. There we go.
It is really hard. You've got to do it.
Pastor David, you're very, very good at telling stories, but what would you say would have been like the best miracle, your best God story that you have?
Did you hear that?
What's the next one? Next question. I don't know. What's my best God story? See, I think that just anybody getting saved just changed. I think that is just amazing. You know, it's almost like, I think when people get healed, that's a great thing. But with the best will in the world, that will be temporary. But when somebody gets saved, that changes things. And I've seen people get saved in the most obscure circumstances. And I think to see the power of God, I remember, one of the instant things I see, I think God takes any opportunity to get people saved. We once had, in our church, we were on the main street, and we had I don't know if you remember this, we had a time the Holy Spirit moved and laughter hit the church. And we were quite in favour of that. And some people prefer if you cry. I prefer laughing. Mandy makes you cry, I make you laugh. And so we start trying to divide up a bit. But we had this time, and we were on the front in St Albans, before we had our own building. We were meeting in the College of Further Education. And it's just, the power of God was moving, and there were bodies everywhere. And we had the windows open in summer, and all this noise is going outside. And apparently this man must have walked into the meeting. He's walked past, what on earth is this? Because you know it's a church, it's just a public. And as he came in, the power of God came on him, and he fell on the floor. And so obviously that got his attention. And he sort of crawled on his hands and knees to somebody who was sitting on the chair. Thankfully, it was one of the ministry team, not some backslidden person. And he just said to him, what is this place? And I said, what do you mean, what is it? Because he didn't know what it was. He said, you're a city church. And he said, what's that? It's a church. You need to give your life to Jesus, which isn't the way we witness normally. He said, do I? I said, yes, you do. And so they prayed for him to give his life to Jesus, and he did that. And they said, now you need to be filled with the Holy Spirit. He said, what's that? He said, never mind, we'll tell you later. And again, that's not how we do it either, really. And they prayed for him, and he fell on the floor and lay there speaking in tongues. And when I came up to him afterwards and spoke to him, he says, you know what, I tried to explain to him what happened, how he gets saved and stuff like that. And I've never met the man before, or since, to be honest. And I just explained how he gets saved. He said, does this happen to everyone that comes in your church? I said, yeah, it happens all the time. The funniest thing was that he said, I've just remembered when I came in here, I was on the way to home with fish and chips for my family's tea. And the back of the church was a plastic bag full of cold fish and chips. So that was one of my favourite stories. I think there's lots of best stories. But I think when you change eternity for somebody, that's the most exciting thing in the world. I think that's one of them.
Mandy, a question. You've been to different countries, seeing what God is doing in different countries. Where have you been impacted by just the way they do church? Because we think the way we do church is right, but once you've been to different countries, you go, so what countries impacted you and why?
That, without a doubt, would be India. I always had a total fear of going to India. There was no way I was going to India. And I was basically told by Paul Hudson, my then boss, I need you to go to India. And I don't think I've ever worked so hard. I don't think I've ever seen such enthusiasm for church as I've seen in India. Sometimes, you know, you go to church and like in my home church, it's like you get up and you roll in, and I don't know that I'm ever that excited or full of anticipation. I think I'm probably just thinking, it'd be nice to catch up with so-and-so, and it'd be nice to catch up with so-and-so, and, you know, a bit like that if I'm really honest. And but gosh, when I went to India, boy, it blew me away. It blew me away the fact that they would set off at 8 o'clock, drive 2 hours and go to a meeting, you know, and nobody's thinking, oh, it's time for bed. Nobody's bothered about how late it is. And what really struck me when I first arrived in some of these villages was you could hear the meeting about 20 minutes before you got to it, because they pride themselves. I think that it's like who's got the biggest PA in India, really. I think this like competition goes on between the churches. And the PA is booming out. Remember, this is a country where Christians are persecuted. This is a country where it's really hard to be a Christian. And the enthusiasm absolutely blew me away. And the hunger, the absolute hunger to hear every single thing you got to say. Bearing in mind, can't speak a word of the language. And when it came to just praying for people, you're surrounded. You're completely surrounded. Pray, you pray, you pray, you pray, you pray. And everywhere, every church we went to, it was like that. And I've always thought, oh, I'm rubbish at praying for people. Oh, they just want Dave to pray for them. They don't want me. I felt the power of God on me, like I've not felt at home, like I've not felt when I've prayed for people in my church so much. I'm not saying I never feel it. I wouldn't want people to think I'm just a really bad Christian. But when I was in India, I just felt absolutely compelled to pray for these people. And I'm jabbering away in English. They aren't hearing a word. They don't know what I'm saying. But they're so blessed that I took time to pray with them. And so probably church in India blew me away more than anything else. The music's dire. It's so awful. But, you know, it's the sort of music you do hear in Indian restaurants. And it's so different to our praise and worship. But it is so lively. Everybody's up for it. It's all, the drums are going like crazy. It's just crazy church, full of excitement, full of anticipation, full of joy, full of exuberance, in a place where they have nothing. That's what struck me. You get back in the nice car with the aircon on, and you leave behind rows of corrugated tin housing. And that's the joy that I've seen in church like never before.
Good. Okay, very good. Any questions? Yes, hold on, I'll come running over.
Churches in Cambodia, Christian churches in Cambodia, any
And yeah, it's absolutely great. The music is very different to in India because the church in Cambodia would sing songs more like we sing. So you don't have the constant drumming and the loudness. But yeah, the joy of the Lord is there. These people love God. And, the church in Cambodia originally was an expat church that Elim started. But when the now missionaries, David and Esther Allen, went out there, they were determined to have an indigenous church. And that's actually what it's all about. That's why we're in the job we do. We don't want to just go and tell them how to do Western church. We want to plant indigenous churches. We want the local people to get it. And so David and Esther have transformed this church. It's a Khmer church now with a Khmer pastor. So although David and Esther are the leading missionaries there, the pastor is called Chamnap, and he's a local. He's Khmer. And he's full of enthusiasm. He's full of the joy of the Lord. And so the church is really growing because it's Khmer now, whereas before it was expat and probably a lot of the NGO workers would have gone to this church. Now it's full of Khmer people. And people are coming in from the Be Free program. They're also going out into the provinces. They've planted 5 churches since they've been there. They go as far away as Kaipe, which is about 2 hours down on the coast. And they've planted churches. And I've been to these village churches. And I mean, honestly, you've got a bit of tarpaulin over you, a few benches, kids sitting everywhere. And again, it's just the happiest place you could ever be. And they love God. So yeah, it's really happening. In a 90% Buddhist country.
I have to ask, how has going on these missionary trips affected your walk with God?
Difficult question. I would like to believe that I am a better person for having done it. I don't think there's a substitute. It's like when you want to learn to drive a car, you've got to get in it. And I think to really get God's heart for the world, for the global picture, you've got to go. Not everyone has that privilege. Not everyone has that opportunity. I've been so privileged with the opportunities I've had. But every time it's been a struggle because I'm honest, I like my home comforts. I'm a Western girl. And, one of my greatest stresses in Cambodia was the fact that my hair wouldn't stay straight because the humidity was like 90%. And every day I got the straighteners out and washed it again. And by 10 minutes in a tuk-tuk ride down to this market, heaving with people, my hair's back to the kind of Bob Geldof look. And so I find that really hard. I do. I find it really challenging. But do you know what? I know I'm not the person I once was. I know I'm different. I know God's enlarged my heart. I know God's changed me. And, I think just that desire to bring God's redemption to people is probably the thing that fires me up, to see God's redemptive work in people's lives, to see that only God can truly transform lives. Without God, life can never be totally transformed. And so, yes, that's probably the driving thing, really.
I think Mandy's found her heart's desire, really. I think that we passed the church together, but I could never get Mandy to do anything in the meetings. In fact, sometimes we do it just for fun. Like I say, Mother's Day, Mandy, just come up, meeting her up, and she'd go, no. I say, I'm the head of the house. You come, and everyone in the church would hiss me because they know about the trial, because Mandy's really popular. And I said, you just come do what your husband tells, and she wouldn't do it. And it was like a joke almost. It's like you wouldn't even give an announcement, would you? Like I wouldn't say speak it, and I know not to do that because that wasn't who she was. No. And the woman you see now sharing about missions, it's the same woman, but what's happened is she connected with her heart passion. And I think we all know when you hear a preacher speaking from the heart, it means it connects a lot more, doesn't it? And then Mandy speaks from her heart, and this is where she found her fulfillment, and she's become the person she always was, but a much more fulfilled way. And I'm really, really dead proud of her. I really am, because I know that Mandy, she would never say boo to a goose, really, but she's going out taking teams, she's doing all sorts of things, she's speaking. I can remember our girl saying, Mum, why do you go stand? You stand up and cry, and people give money. I thought that's pretty much what she did, because she's overwhelmed in her heart. But I think it touches us inside. Some of what Mandy's talking about cannot be explained in words. It can only be felt in her heart. And so missions isn't about catching up here, it's about catching in here. And I've seen Mandy's become somebody with the ability to share the heart of missions, not just facts and figures. So I think, well done.
You can move the chairs closer together. More questions?
Thank you very much. But there you go. When you go out there, do you find it, after spending, I don't know how long you're out there for, weeks, months, or whatever, in the work that you're doing, I can imagine it's quite difficult. Do you find it difficult coming back to, how do I explain it? Coming back to the world, and you've got to be in the world but not of it, but you've got to function in this world when you've been in an area where there is lacking and there is great need, and the culture is so different, but people they have a different joy and enthusiasm for change and embracing each other, and you come back to your church of comfortable church. Do you find that difficult to adjust?
Do you want to pause?
Yeah, the simple answer is yes, I really do. And I suppose, I have sometimes this, I don't think it's not always a holy frustration, sometimes it's an unholy frustration. And I do get frustrated because I do feel that if we're not careful in church, we can become quite discontent and quite demanding. But I would say I don't see that in this church at all. I've loved being here. And I think one of the reasons that you are who you are is because of the leaders you have who have got this enlarged heart. And I think it would do every single church member and pastor good to do mission and to go on mission. But I'm not going to pretend, like I've said, I'm some sort of Mother Teresa, because, when I'm packing my case to go back home and I see my plane, I'm really happy to get on it. And I'm glad I don't have to live in some of the houses I've seen in India and Cambodia. I'm really glad. I wouldn't swap places. But I do feel that heaviness, that weight of responsibility to not just go out there and do a mission and forget. I do feel that weight of responsibility to stay connected, to actually say to those people, I will come back. Because that's the hardest thing to say, because it's not easy to do it. It's really hard to do it. And, I've got this challenge of going back to India next year, and I still keep thinking, can I do it? Will I do it? I don't know if I can do it. I'll send Linda. Because I actually found it really, really hard. But there's a bit of me that I'm like, don't ever let me get comfortable again, because I don't want to be comfortable. My former boss, Paul Hudson, said to me that missions had ruined him. And I do think that. Missions has ruined me, and I can't ever go back to how it was. And sometimes the discomfort I feel is really quite difficult, because I can start being this campaigner, and I can start ranting, and I start moaning about things, and I get really annoyed. I get annoyed about the way people are about animals in this country, and don't even get me started, because and that's where I think I have to be really careful, and I have to watch my attitude and just remember that, it's there but for the grace of God, and I've been given amazing opportunities which not everyone will have. So the answer is yes, definitely. It does affect me when I come back. But what I need to do is always remember to channel that passion, that call, into something positive, and not allow negativity to come in, not allow myself to think I'm better than other people because I've been and done it, because I'm really not. And if God doesn't change your heart for the better, then don't do it. And I believe that God has changed my heart for the better, but I have to keep reminding myself, just watch yourself here.
And I think too, that whole thing, when you go to, it's very practical. I know a lot of you are going to the Amazon, so you have to think about that. But you will be thinking about transitioning, that the culture will be very different when you get there. And I'm sure they'll be talking to you about things you have to bear in mind. This will be different. and you're ready to transition to that and realize you're going into a different culture. Can I just say to you, you have to remember you'll have to transition back into this culture as well. You'll believe in a culture that you're beginning to feel comfortable with, and maybe even accept some of the things too. You'll have to transition back here because the country's not become full of bad people when you're away. And realize culture in Britain is very different to wherever you are. There's two transitions, one to where you're going, and then realize you're coming back into a culture, and you need just as much preparation to return sometimes as you do to go.
Thank you. No. Questions? Daniel? Can you shout, son? Save me
I
running.
wonder if it's easier than the first one.
No, this one's for Mandy. Did you have some people sometimes, they meet Jesus and they have this spiritual fight to kind of accept him? Did you ever have somebody that either chose to leave Jesus and follow on, or somebody that really had this spiritual fight to accept Jesus?
I'm glad you're answering that. There you go.
Certainly in the context of my work with Elim Missions, there was a disappointment this year in terms of a girl in Cambodia, and she had come through the Be Free program and she'd done well and she'd got a job. She'd come out of the sex industry and life seemed to be going really well, and I had really befriended her to the point that, I'd been texting her and messaging her and asking how we could help her, and, we'd sent money from the charity, and then I found out that actually she'd really gone back much more into the old life. And I'm not saying she was back in the sex industry, but she was certainly back with men who weren't good for her. And I had told her I'd be in the church on such and such a Sunday, and I had gone in anticipation of just sitting her down and saying, look, what's happened, what's going on? And she didn't even come. And I left the country thinking, I can't believe I didn't see her, and it's still on my mind, and I will message her, but I can just see from her Facebook post that she's not in a good place. But you see, it's so hard in Cambodia for that to happen, because the girls are put under pressure by their parents to go back into the old life, because the reality is they can make $300 a month with men, and they can probably make $100 a month working in some of the jobs they're doing. So that's been hard, and I'm sad about that. But I'm not giving up at all, and that's a really strong reminder I need to get back in touch. But yeah, that's an example on the mission, but I can't think of other examples particularly.
Any other questions? Yeah, Debbie, hold on.
I wondered, when you're leaders and you're busy in ministry and leadership, what do you do, or how do you take yourselves away from that to get refreshed from God and allow him to minister to you, and just, like people go to conferences and retreats to get refreshed. If you're sort of in the leadership, or you're the people that are speaking, where do you go, or how do you go to a place for God to refresh you?
For me, you're going to find this a bit hard to believe, but I am a basic introvert, not an extrovert. I know on platforms I come over, I'm very outgoing, but one of the definitions of extroverts and introverts is extroverts get charged up by being with people. Introverts get charged up by being alone. I need to be alone quite a chunk of every day. I'm a natural introvert. I like people. I'm not against it, but so I drive for 40,000 miles a year, and so in an average day I'll be driving 5 hours. So I'm alone with Jesus for 5 hours every day in my car, and that becomes my sanctuary. And so a lot of what I do is there, and I think we have different answers to this, because I'm quite a self-sufficient person with that. But I have people who I share my heart with and I talk to. But I actually find I need to be alone. I need a lot of alone time in the presence of the Lord to keep me going. I don't need lots of conferences. I don't get many of them. We used to run. My problem is I run conferences. You know, I used to go to them, but now I run them. And if you're in charge of something, you don't get as much out of it, do you? In fact, you're looking forward to the end of it, hoping nothing goes wrong. But that's what I do. And I've also had to learn how to come into the presence of God quickly and out again. So if you're in charge of a meeting, you know, somebody comes up and says the generator's bust, you have to say, well, do this, and then get back into the presence. So I like to believe, I like to think that I'm learning how to sort of live in the edges of his presence at worst. You know, I'd like to live in his presence all the time and feel I can come in and out of his presence. And I think a lot of us do that. Let me give you an example. I think you do that more than you think, because have you ever been going along and suddenly start singing the chorus halfway through? I think, so where did the other half go? And I think our spirit's always singing. And I think, and then the real us is always worshipping. And I like to sort of just think, Lord, teach me how to catch up with my spirit sometimes. Let my brain hear what my spirit's doing. So when I get a spare moment, I worship all the time. That's right. Do you want to answer it?
Don't answer that. How do you get charged up?
She listens to CDs of me preaching.
That's when I can't sleep. I didn't mean it.
So injured.
I'm actually not very good at this. I'm really not very good at it. And David and I are rubbish at date nights and time off. I admit that. We're not very good at it at all. And it can be an area of conflict in our relationship because we're not good at it. And I think we're still learning how to do date nights and time off. But
we're both better workaholics, to be honest. That's the
well,
problem.
yeah, and because I'm the sort of person that company totally revives me. I love being with people. I mean, I feel like I've made 70 new friends already this weekend, and I've already got half of you on Facebook. And that's the sort of person I am, you see. So in a way, we are such opposites. I would say I am an extrovert. I love being with people. So I find friendship revives me. Having a bestie like Linda is really good for me. And I love being with friends. I love being with my children, you know. So one thing that I have really discovered recently is Premier Praise, because like Dave, I'm in the car a lot, but I would probably prefer to listen to Ed Sheeran, if I'm really honest. But Premier Praise...
Assemblies of God, I think.
But I've just discovered Premier Praise, and I find myself singing along to it, and it's actually really good, and they have really good discussions. I used to know Linda listened to it, and I thought Linda was really holy, and I'm listening to secular music in my car. But I've actually started listening to Premier Praise on my journeys to Malvern, and it's really, really good. So I think that's really good. But I would say perhaps for me, the way I get most revived is being at the International Centre in Malvern. It's just like the most amazing place to work because almost everyone's a Christian, but we're all different and we all have different roles. And one of my best friends in my home church, she finds it really hard sometimes, just day to day, just local church stuff. And I say to her, the thing is, because I have this huge parachurch organisation around me, I'm surrounded. So I could have lunch with one person one day in a different department to me, and then and we're just always bouncing off things. We're always discussing what we do, and it's just a most incredibly energizing feeling. And when I walk into the missions office on a Monday morning and I see all their faces, and these are my friends, but they're also Christians. They love God, and we love doing mission together. I find that it really is like meat and drink to me. So I'd love to say I spend 3 hours a day soaking. I'd love to say it, but it wouldn't be true. And I feel that prayer for me is much more of a discipline than a delight. I struggle with devotional life. I struggle with it really badly. I'm really not good at it. You know, if I lie on my bed thinking, right, I'm going to soak in Jesus, I'll be thinking about the bits on the carpet. Because I'm a doer, and so for me it is very hard. I think the whole Martha Mary story always upsets me a bit because I think, well, you know, we do still need Marthas that get on and do the stuff, and that is my temperament, that's my nature, that's my personality. Yeah. So the whole, getting before God for refreshment is not an easy area for me, except that people revive me. I'll go home tonight buzzing, and I'll be thinking about the conversation I've had at dinner. I'll be thinking about these lovely ladies, 2 of them sitting there that I've met this weekend. I'll be thinking about Bill when he told me his life story last night and how amazing. And I was telling Dave, Bill's done this and Bill did that, because I'm a people person, and so I come alive when I'm around people. I don't need lots of time on my own. As you can see, I talk a lot as well.
Good. Any other questions? Yeah, Tim, hold on.
Can you give us an idea of the size of the work that Elim Missions does? So sort of how many full sort of long-term missionaries are you working with? Generally, how many you send out on short-term missions each year? How many come back? That sort of thing.
Hopefully they all come back. Who have you got in mind?
So in terms of Elim missionaries, we have, I think at the moment, 85 full-time, long-term serving missionaries on the mission field. It changes and varies from year in, year out, because we have what's called the Missionary Academy, which is a year-long training which everyone has to undergo prior to going to the mission field, and there's 14 students graduating from that this weekend. So again, they'll be going, most of them will be going long-term to the mission field. So it's always changing, it's always evolving, and some return and some go. But currently, about 85 missionaries, I think. How many nations are they serving in?
57.
Oh, NLT member, you see, 57 nations. But alongside this, there's this massive thing which is called Elim Global, which that's like uncontainable. It's impossible to say how big Elim Global is, because Elim Global is like all of the people, the indigenous churches that have a relationship with the Elim denomination. So they're connected to us by partnerships. So when we send out short-term teams, they won't necessarily just go to an Elim missionary. They may go to one of our partner organizations. And I mean, in India alone, we must have, how big is Elim Global? It's about 40,000 members, isn't it?
I don't know. Can't count
So
that
it's
big.
massive. It's just massive. And it really is uncontainable, and you cannot measure it. And we've been trying to do that, and actually not very successfully, because, constantly churches are being added to us because they want to have some sort of relationship with a UK-based church. So within Elim Global, we would send out lots of people to do training, to train indigenous pastors, because the long-term goal isn't really to send white people to the mission field. The long-term goal is to plant the church globally. And to do that, you've got to have lots and lots of indigenous pastors. The white missionaries can't do that. So Elim Global runs alongside Elim International Missions. And we work in partnership. It's like, I can't even describe how it is really, but it's like an umbilical cord. We're joined together, and everyone, all of that comes through the Elim Missions office. So you can imagine how busy the staff are. In terms of short-term teams, we send out approximately 200 people every year on short-term mission, which is incredible. When I started the job, I was in the job 12 years ago, I had 7 people on the computer, and I was working like a couple of hours a week. I'm now working 17 hours, and I definitely can't do the job in 17 hours, which is why if you email me, I'll answer you probably in 5 weeks' time. And that's not good. But the job is just exploding, and more people are going on mission. And last year we sent probably about 200, and that's we're averaging about 200 a year at the moment. Your 18 is keeping my numbers nice and healthy, actually. So well done, Yate. Is that everything you was asking me, Tim? Yeah.
When you say that you have full-time missionaries, do you expect them to be a married couple, or can single people go out?
We probably have an equal balance of both. There's absolutely no criteria to be married. There's no criteria to be single. We've got missionaries like Jackie Griffiths who serve in Malawi. Jackie's an ordained Elim minister. She's a single lady. She's been on mission for many years now, and she's one of our great missionaries. Equally, we've had couples like David and Esther Allen who've gone out to Cambodia as a married couple. We've had families go to the mission field. We've had people take young children to the mission field. So there really is no rule book at all about that. It's the call of God. It's the suitability for mission. It's you know, lots of different people from all walks of life come to our office and apply to become long-term missionaries, and in lots and lots of different places too. So it's people from all walks of life.
Okay, I would say we're nearly out of time. Any other last question? Last
Sort of time for a place. I would say that probably the majority of the short-term placements are people that have got 1 or 2 weeks of their annual leave, which they want to do something really helpful, something really useful with their people with a heart to do mission, and they're normally people who are still in work, and the average placement time would be 1 to 2 weeks. We do have people we have quite a few people who are students, maybe elective, they've got to do an elective placement, like I've had doctors come to me who are still at medical school, and they've done perhaps 3 months somewhere like India in a hospital. So we get quite a few of those kinds of people. But I would say they would average out between 1 and 2 weeks. Obviously, if you're going somewhere as far as Brazil, it's not going to be for a week. But lots of people go to places like Romania, Macedonia, Estonia, places that are on our doorstep that budget airlines fly to. And you can easily go and do a week in one of those countries because you can be there in a couple of hours. So we do lots of those.
Do many from who've done short-term missions, many from those then go on to full-time?
Not as many as you might think, although what happens now, because we've got the academy in place, this is our training academy, that's a much more recent development. So what we would do now is when someone returns from the mission field, we always ask them to complete an evaluation of their time, what their thinking is about future mission, and now we're seeing quite a lot of those coming onto the academy, so they're seeing it as a step towards going as a full-time missionary, yeah. But lots of people want to do something worthwhile with their time. They've got the time, the talent, and the finance to do it. So that's what they want to do, really, offer 2 weeks of their life, really, to go and do that.
Can you just put your hands together for Mandy and David, please? Stay where you are yet. Stay where you are yet. Just would like to invite. Come ahead, Linda. I know you're here. Come on, Linda. Yo. Linda Murray, I often say, is the brains behind Pound by Pound. Okay, and Elim Missions is self-financing. In other words, basically, the missions department has to raise all its own money, and so, you know, it really is moving by faith and a lot of prayer, and God gives Holy Spirit strategies, and one of those strategies to help in missions was Pound by Pound, and this church is tremendous at supporting missions. I know many of you have signed up to Pound by Pound. It's £1 a week, which is basically 4 point something pounds a month, or however that works out. £52 a year.
I'd want a 4.33, wouldn't it?
4.33. There you go. Thank you very much, Steve. And you know, if you want to support missions in that way, pound by pound, come and see me, and I can get you a direct debit form to fill in and send up to the office. What's tremendous is often people see things on TV and they go, oh, I want to support that. But so much money goes into administration. And with Elim Missions, basically 5% goes into administration. And for me, that's phenomenal. You know, no other place on, what would you say, on the high street does anything like that. Some of them are taking up to 50% into administration and more. I won't name and shame. That would be a lack of integrity. But I've asked Linda to come up because, Linda, you're doing a bit of a fundraiser. Can you tell us about the fundraiser? And, yeah, go for it.
Didn't they do a great job? And I love working with Mandy Campbell. We just are such a team, and we bounce off each other wherever we are in this world. We are doing a crazy thing. On June the 23rd, there is a sponsored walk. My boss, Ian Heathketh, came up with the idea that he and I should walk 26.5 miles around the North Circular of London on Mission Sunday and drop into a few of our Elim churches along the way. And then we should have a little sleep, a little bit of breakfast, and walk 26.5 miles around the South Circular in an effort to raise money for Elim missions. So my little ambition for this last few weeks has been, let's find people who'd like to sponsor us to do the walk. I've got a form. If you'd like to sign up, it doesn't matter how little, it doesn't matter what size of donation. If you'd like to sponsor Elim missions and get involved in some of the incredible work that Mandy's just talked about, sponsor us to walk. We'd love that. Make it worthwhile for us trying to kill ourselves over 2 days. That would be really helpful.
Okay. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll ask Linda if you can put the form here, and if you want, please fill in your name. I'm not sure, an amount, and yeah, bless. Now I want to ask you all to stand up. Oh yes, love. You've got a question for Linda. Thank you, Linda. Let me just encourage you. It's a massive undertaking for 18 people to go to the Amazon. And so thank you, Linda, for coming with us. Also ask, church, pray. We need your prayers in preparation. We need your prayers in getting there, getting back. As you've heard, really, you're going into one reality, which you have to work out. Then you have to come back into another reality and maintain integrity the whole way through. And that can be a real challenge. But what I want you to do now is, have you been blessed? Yeah. Has God poured into your life? Yeah. Well, this couple tirelessly pour their lives out, day in, day out. And so I would like us to gather around them and pray. And just pray blessing and lift them up in prayer right now. But also, you've had conversations of you've sat round, tables and out in the garden. I want you just to, if the Holy Spirit prompts you, keep on praying for them. There'll be days where, just like you heard, I love the honesty. You want to give up, or you just want to, but God sustains, and just that. The simplicity and sincerity with which you both present your lives is encouraging to the rest of us, because none of us are called to be supermen or women. We're called to be men and women empowered by the Holy Spirit, and it's all the glory is for God. It's because we are broken vessels, but God can use us, and you present yourselves not as superwomen and superman, but as vessels that God is using. And I hope that encourages you, that you would want to do the same. But I'd ask you, let's stand, let's come down, and I'm asking everybody, let's gather around this couple. I'll move the chairs away if that's okay.